Welcome back to an episode of Spectator Mode. I'm Neil Strebig. With me, as always, is Donald Double D DeCray.
Yes, here willingly today.
Oh, jeez. Act like I hold you for ransom every week. Unbelievable.
And no one
So,
ever
but
pays.
who would, man? Yeah.
It's terrible, but so true.
Yeah. Yeah. But no, we got only four topics today, keeping it kind of short and sweet. Talk a little bit about some Valorant news, some news on the Horizon TV show front. We're going to talk a little bit on our favorite little labor shortages or labor changes, I should say, and staffing issues within the video game industry. Bit of a grouping there. So it's kind of like three items we'll, join in together there. And then talk a little bit about Nintendo Direct Mini, the June showcase.
All right. I mean, I'll kick us off then, I guess. Valorant. Riot Games, which owns Valorant, has announced that they're going to begin recording game audio beginning on July 13th in North America. They're saying this is basically because they want to use this as evidence for violations of behavioral policies. So, if you get reported or whatever for in-game chat, voice chat specifically, in theory, they can use the chat logs, the recordings to verify those reports and action it. Now, from what we know so far, it does not sound like it's going to be automated. It sounds like it's part of a manual review process is like the long-term goal here. Although I imagine like someday they're going to look to make that automated, that it's going to pick up certain keywords and do automatic banning is what I imagine the long-term goal is. I don't know. What do you think they're going to do with it?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not quite sure what their glossary or terms are going to be then to kind of use as an instrument then to ban or restrict people. That's what I'm curious about. Like, what exactly are they looking for? I mean, naturally, I imagine racist, derogatory terms at the gates, but how are they really going to police that? I'll be honest. When you sent me this, if I played Valorant, I probably would stop just because again, I
Really?
don't like that invasion of privacy like that. I don't like knowing that my voice then, even just me talking to my boys, if I'm just in game chat, like when we do crossplay, if I'm playing everyone on PS5 or PS4, I can just talk to them on PlayStation chat. Okay. Now when we're doing crossplay, we're in the party chat. It's a simple notion of, listening to the conversation, even if it's for good intentions. I don't like that. Like I downloaded Fall Guys and I immediately got rid of it when I found out it was Epic and I had to sign up for all of Epic stuff because I don't like Fortnite and all that because of the data mining they do. I really just rubs me the wrong way. I get it. You have social media, anything else, you have a presence, whatnot, but it's the single notion of I know my information is intentionally being misused.
Yeah, and I mean, there's a much larger discussion to be had, I think, around Epic Games and their privacy policies and the way they do stuff. But I think it's a very interesting idea that you're making of just like you would nope out of the whole thing because I think it does raise real concerns in terms of implementation. Because like right now, as far as we know, this is literally just testing systems. I'm sure there's concerns in terms of storing the data itself, all these audio files for everyone talking in the games. That's got to present challenges like scaling it essentially up. And then you get to the part of how does it get used in the reporting function, which I think is the long-term goal. Is it only used for manual reviews of things, so you still go by the actual reporting, or does it become automated? And like you said, does it key into certain words? Because then that obviously, like you said, brings up the next concern of, well, then the way I talk to my friends and stuff, like I know they're not going to be offended by certain things. You know what I mean? And even if the term itself might be offensive or on their like no list, so to speak, no one I'm playing with is going to care or report me for it. So do you make it fully automated? Do you make it so that players still have to report them and then the logs are reviewed automatically that way? Like I think there's a lot of concerns in terms of how this is going to be appropriately implemented and what else would they do with the audio files? You know what I mean? Like they're going to be recording stuff besides just game audio, just through the nature of the fact that it's going to be picking up. A lot of people don't have good sound environments, right? A lot of background noise, a lot of things going on, TVs in the background talking. What if something comes through there? I don't know. It's got a lot of concerns for me as well. I'd be very curious if any listeners would also consider dropping Valorant or if this makes you reconsider kind of the direction Riot's going with the game. And, and I think, again, a larger discussion to be had about appropriate policing, essentially, of players and their interactions and how much the game company is responsible for policing that stuff. A larger discussion for another day. So Moving along to our next topic, Neil, why don't you tell me what's going on with Horizon?
Yeah, man, I guess it's still dealing with, Big Brother tech in a way. The Horizon TV show based on Horizon Zero Dawn. And then, of course, the sequel just came out, Horizon Forbidden West. But a bit of a leak on the TV show title, which maybe gives an idea where they're going to be going with it. It's going to be called Horizon 2074. So a little before we see Allure as her somewhat adult self, when she's 17, 18 at the time, and then, going through her rite of passage and whatnot as well. So it's kind of at the fall of mankind, but not quite at the complete fall in that timeline. So rumor is it's going to be looking at more of the downfall of human society before Aloy's timeline really takes effect.
Yeah, I mean, because like Aloy relative to the in-game fall of civilization, as it were, huge time jump. I don't know exactly how much it is, but like several hundred years from when shit went sideways to Aloy's storyline in the game and the world that we see presented. And I think what's also interesting is I haven't played Forbidden West. I have played Zero Dawn, and that game gives you lots of really fun tidbits and like teases of kind of like what happened, like how did the world get this way, right? Like
Mhm.
where did the fall of civilization come from? Especially in the Frozen Waste or whatever the expansion that was released for uh Zero Dawn.
Yeah, I actually have
Really,
not played that all the way through that DLC.
oh, I mean, it's that one really does dive into a lot of the lore behind like what happened, what's going on, where things came from, yada yada, is really much expanded in that in a big way. Do you think they're making the right call by going for what's functionally a prequel to the games?
100%, 100%. I mean, we talked about this before when we talked about all of PlayStation's and Sony's, I should say, TV shows in the works.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's more compelling to see the fall of it and then what happens at the end of it. And I say that largely because, again, some of these games, the narratives are so strong already. I don't want to see a shot by shot remake. I just don't. And I also think the best way in Horizon's case to get new fans is that apocalyptic downfall. And it's not zombie based or anything else. Yes, it's kind of, Terminator robots and whatnot, but it's good intentions basically with, fighting climate change in a lot of ways. And then what's going to happen. So I think there's a lot to pull from, a lot of themes too that are currently going on as well. And I think that's the best way to really get new fans in. And then I think you can do a bit more fan service probably when you bring in, then you can show the tribes and maybe even have lore then too. You could even hold that until the third season, even depending on how big that gap is. Or, which is also possible, I'm not sure how I feel about this, because I'd rather see the world building come to a full circle as far as, okay, set it up as where did the humans go wrong and kind of where does it leave it? But I could see them basically doing the prequel, but then glimpses into the future, which I feel like
It
that
could be
would
a
get a
little
bit
interesting.
discombobulated there
Yeah, because like
or
I feel like
disjointed. So
established fans are gonna go crazy when they start seeing some of the monsters, right? Like when the machines come out, you see the Thunderjaw for the first time, for example. If that's going to be in the show, anyone who's played the game knows Thunderjaw, what that enemy looks like. You're gonna get a reaction. You know what I mean? So you don't need to have the same characters and same storyline to be paying homage to the game itself and be like making those references to appeal to established fans. I think it comes back to a point that was made before on the podcast here is like I personally have fears about retreading established ground. I don't know how appealing it is to people who have already played through it or experienced it, and I don't know how much it brings a new experience to the storytelling by changing the medium. In a lot of ways, it's less immersive because you're just watching things happen now instead of being part of them. So I think that's all like a legitimate concern in terms of taking a story and just making a TV show port of it, as it were. I hope it comes off well. You know, I really enjoy the game, so I hope it goes well. And like, I really hope my main concern is that they try to just draw it out too long, right? Because the game does set forth enough clues to say that this is a very specific and time limited event in human history. You know what I mean? Like it's a very specific moment. It ends, you know? And then I hope they just bring that to an end and then they move forward then. And then we can see the rise of the tribes maybe can be its own separate mini series, so to speak. You can cut forward then and do like, there's like, you know, like 2 or 3 seasons maybe per time period as you're moving through things, watching them develop rather than just like a long expansive 5 6 7 seasons and everything's just falling apart for that long. I think would be the wrong call, this
yeah,
storyline.
no, I feel you there. It's falling apart though.
Yeah, speaking of falling apart, Um, Several games and developers have been having issues with staffing, and I think we're gonna just lump these all together. So I'm gonna go through it kind of quickly. Unity is laying off a bunch of staff. Pokemon Go is canceling projects as it cuts staff again. And even Halo Infinite, there are bugs and issues reported going on in the game that aren't being addressed because 343 admits that they have moved developers to other projects. And I think for me, the major concern with all of this is kind of the long term support we can expect for games and titles if they're relatively quick to move along to new projects. Like Pokemon Go, that's been out maybe a little bit longer now, but Halo Infinite's not even been out a year. It's losing people already. You know what I mean? And like, especially in the state that we see a lot of games get released, they need support. They need balance adjustments. They need patches. You know, they are not fully finished games anymore that you can play start to finish with no issues. They need a little bit of love after the fact, and a little love is okay in my opinion. But like I said, like the main question here is like, does this raise any concern for you in terms of confidence buying games and long-term support?
Yeah, I mean, kind of go through each circumstance a bit to shape this out a bit. I mean, Unity was a direct kind of layoff, which is unfortunate, but we have seen that. And again, it's kind of how viable is, game industry and game development. And I still think it is a bit of you kind of have to figure out what titles you're on, and be ready to have to move, bait and switch a little bit too, depending on what course of your career is in, and also too kind of where you are in the development team and what side of the business you're on as well. But again, layoffs happen, unfortunately. Pokemon Go, it's an older game, and again, how many people are playing it? So I'm not surprised by that. It is still unfortunate, but the game's almost 10 years old for a mobile game. I mean, that's a hell of a long time. It's a hell of a run, honestly. The fact that they're still even putting out content.
I think it's 8 years
So
old, but yeah, it is older than I thought it was. In my head, I thought it was
yeah,
more recent. God, this is making me feel old.
it's been out for almost 10 years, like I said. So like 8 years, still a long time. So I think it's just a mobile games usually don't have that long of a lifespan. So I think that's also an unfortunate thing. 343, I think, is more of an alarming thing because again, it's a game that hasn't even been out for a year yet, and you already move on to the next project, and it kind of comes into Unity's issue too of like how much stability do you have if you're going to get bebopped around and kind of going, and like you already brought out a big game, had a huge launch, everybody was excited to play Halo again, got rave reviews except for the battle pass and whatnot as well. Why would you not keep that going and make sure you have the staff to keep people interested? And again, it kind of, I think, plays into what we're seeing with a lot of developers too, that it's like this need to almost want an annual release on games rather than, hey, it's okay for a game. And Pokemon Go, great example, even for mobile game. You just keep putting out new content, keeping it fresh and keeping the fan base interested. There's no reason any game shouldn't be able to go for 3 4 years. And again, that goes very against capitalist rules and the idea of, keep making new. But Halo Infinite, it's like, okay, you might have another Halo game in development, but if it's 3 4 5 years out, there shouldn't be any issue for moving people off because you're providing a service. Why would you take the service away? And that's ultimately going to hurt the next iteration of the game. It's bad business.
Well, I think for me, Pokemon Go being older, I guess there's an argument to be made for downsizing or moving staff along, but for Niantic, the developer, Pokemon Go has been their cash cow. You know what I mean? Like they've had other titles they've tried to bring out or they have brought out. 2019, they released a Harry Potter title, which is already closed. They've just shut down the service on that. Like it's done. It didn't even make it 3 years, which maybe that's more typical of the mobile game market. But it seems to me a little bit silly to be downsizing on the one thing that at this moment is drawing in the money, because to me that seems like, hey, you're undermining your long-term profitability for short-term games or gain, because you do need to keep bringing content for it to continue to be interesting and keep users engaged, which comes back to the Halo issue. I mean, we're talking bugs, you know what I mean? Like the article and stuff that we're looking at stems around melee interactions and desync involved with that. But Halo Infinite, the way it's been designed as a free-to-play game, also survives pretty much exclusively with new content, either new maps or new skins or new guns. Like stuff like that is what's going to drive the long-term profitability of the game. And if you're moving people off one bug fix will just drive people away, period. But if you're moving developers off of the title, I don't know how you keep putting out the content you need to keep people engaged with the title. So I don't know. I've got mixed feelings about it on all fronts because I understand your points in terms of the being realistic about mobile gaming industry, in terms of Pokemon Go and just economics in Unity's case. You know what I mean? Not sure I
Would you
fully agree
ever
with
think
it.
about getting into the video game industry?
Would I personally,
Mhm.
as a developer,
Or
I
stuff
think.
like this makes you do a double take?
Oh, I mean, I wouldn't do it until video game industry starts seeing larger scale unionization. I don't think there's a lot of good job security here because like this stuff to me says again like what's the larger picture here? It's in the interest of short term games or profits, they will lay off staff. You know what I mean? In the long term, I think it hurts the games. I think it hurts their profitability, but they're more focused on yearly releases and having just like one game blow up. And it's kind of like gambling, right? You roll the dice, you hit it big once. The company can afford to make those rolls and make those bets. Essentially, they just need to hit it big once in a while. But for the employees, if you're not lucky enough to be in one of those titles that gets big, your job's just constantly, I think, under threat.
Yeah, no, I mean you're not wrong. You're not wrong.
Well,
On a brighter note, and I mean still game development, so how
mm-hmm.
bright is it, I guess? But no, Nintendo Direct had their indie showcase this week. Almost, I didn't do the full count. I want to say it was probably about 2 dozen titles, maybe a little bit more than that. They quite a bit.
Oh yeah.
Maybe just trying to under 2 dozen, maybe. But not going to go through all the titles. What games are you most intrigued by? Anything on there too that you would kind of like, take it or leave it?
I mean, the first one that caught my attention is the first one they talked about was Monster Hunter Rise. Sunbreak is coming out, the first expansion for it. I think it's the first expansion. But Monster Hunter World was a phenomenal game. They brought it to PC. It did very, very well in expanding the Monster Hunter franchise, bringing it to a new market and a new audience. They have a format for them that works pretty well. You kill monsters, you get materials, you build better gear, you kill stronger monsters, ad nauseum. But it's fun. It works well. Monster Hunter Rise was the next title that they released after World. They made some changes in that, and one of the main criticisms was people felt like there was a lot less content. The flip side of that was they were comparing Rise at launch to World post like expansions and like free updates, content updates and stuff that they pushed out with it. And so I don't know if that was fair. A lot of people pointed out that World on launch compared to Rise on launch, Rise probably had more monsters in it, more gear in it and stuff like that. And so, I think looking forward to the title, what they do with the expansion packs is probably going to make or break it, and whether that can maybe take the spot that World holds right now, because it still has a very large player base and does very well for itself. So
Yeah, I'm always
I've
surprised by
been on the
that.
fence really from going from World to Rise personally. Like I'm close to trying to make that transition, pending
You have
Sunbreak
to let me know
here.
what you think when you do, or if you do. I haven't played World. I'm honestly haven't really played any Monster Hunters. I'm not against that format by any means, but just isn't a title I've really followed. I was surprised by how many. I mean, not surprised by how many retro, but I guess how many retro remakes, like the Pac-Man open world kind of game. I was kind of like,
Mm-hmm.
that's kind of interesting. I don't know. Pac-Man kind of have the lore for that. I don't know. Bomberman update, we thought was kind of cool.
Fucking
I thought that
open
was going to
world
be,
everywhere, right? Jesus Christ.
yeah, I thought the Bomber was going to be more of a free to play account they did with 99, and then on the Super Mario anniversary, it was 35 players playing against one another. I thought they would kind of do more of that, but still, if you're a Bomberman fan, I think you got to be excited. Mega Man Battle Network, a bit of an old school vibe there as well, a little bit different, but again, Mega Man fans going to be ecstatic. Only really two games stuck out for me. Well, I guess two and a half.
Okay.
I didn't know Sonic Frontiers was coming to the Switch. I thought that was pretty dope.
Okay.
I honestly figured since open world, it was going to be the same old. Can the Switch handle it? And I don't know how I missed that from following it, whatnot, that it was going to be the Switch. So big win for Switch there. But Blank, which was just that indie game with the wolf and the fawn, that looked fucking stellar. I'll be honest, it looks super peaceful. I mean, I enjoy those indie games, especially on the Switch, like Spiritfarer. Just simple game, kind of continuing on the PS4 as well. Like simple, I don't care. It's just soothing. Like I don't know, I enjoyed games of that, especially stressful weeks. It's like you don't have to think much. Melancholy music, like all right, get the Zen on. And Square Enix at the end there, Harvestella, I was intrigued by. I don't know if I'll buy it, but I'm intrigued to see how the fan base goes with that because it seemed like it was taking Final Fantasy mixed in with Harvest Moon, which I imagine a lot of people just fucking orgasmed all over the screen they saw that.
Right? Like take some of your winning franchises and let them have a love child, which is either going to be an incestuous monster or the greatest thing in the world. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, I don't know. I think that's one of the questions I'm curious too in terms of fan reactions. How people feel about the number of remakes, updates, ports. Like, there's not too many new things per se coming, new titles being launched at the moment. Now that's fine. But what I'm curious about a little bit here though is like how people feel with the number of ports, updates, remakes. Like, not a lot of new titles. I'm confident they got a lot of stuff in the works. That's fine. But is this stuff that's like really worth announcing in the Nintendo Direct essentially, or should like is it was a mini showcase, I guess? I don't know. And that's kind of where I have the mixed feelings a little bit is like how much of this is newsworthy in the first place, essentially.
Well, that's kind of Nintendo Directs, though. I feel like a lot of them are kind of indie showcases, though, more so. There's usually 4 or 5, maybe 6 titles. I mean, Mario Rabbids was in there too, which we glazed over. I'm not a big fan of that, but I mean, people love that fucking
I
game.
have
So, like,
no feelings about it.
so I mean, that's a huge win for them. But again, that's just something I'm not really in. But I mean, most Nintendo Directs, I feel like they do one per month, and I will say probably maybe 3 tops. I think really knock out of the park since the Switch has been out.
Well, do you think then maybe it's the production schedule that they're doing it monthly and there's just not that much to announce month to month?
Yes and no. I think it's a culmination of. I think it depends on how big of an indie fan you are. Which again, like for me, the directs are exciting because a lot of those games, even like Heart of Stella one, I would imagine will be on sale for relatively cheap. Especially, Blank would definitely be for sale by for like under $5 at some point as well. So games like that I get excited about because I'm like, okay, on the Switch, I know I'm going to be able to cop them for cheap at a certain point, even don't buy them at launch. I think the other portion of that is Nintendo's titles, if it's not the mainstays, like a new Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild game. I mean, Super Smash Brothers had endless content for a while as well. I mean, they had directs almost dedicated to that.
That's
Unless
true.
it's one of
That's
the
very
big
true.
titles, like a new Metroid or an F Zero launch or Donkey Kong Country, I don't think you get the same hype. And it's not that they aren't producing content for those; it's just different. Even for Animal Crossings, like after launch, it's basically just additional content. So it's a Mario Rabbids kind of thing. If you're a fan of that franchise, and that's Nintendo's sweet spot though, because they do have such a loyal fan base, it doesn't matter. Like,
Very true. I mean, I also think Nintendo is probably the game company that maybe suffers the most from emulators and piracy, just because they do have a lot of retro games, which means cracked codes and less security measures. A lot of those games are easy to emulate these days, and I've said this before. Like, if you don't provide legal and easily accessible means of acquiring those titles, people will look for other avenues to acquire them. So, in a certain respect, updating those things and bringing them to the console in a way that people can enjoy them for, like you said, like $5 or something, it's not such a bad cost. And I think most fans are willing to pay that to support the franchise. It's just giving them a low cost avenue to do this legally. So I think that's definitely the right idea. I guess that's probably all we need to discuss with the Nintendo Direct here, which I think brings us to a close for today. Curious what everyone's thoughts are on the discussion points, the future of the gaming industry, and developers post-release, things you may be looking forward to in future Nintendo Directs, and titles that you are hoping to hear announced, and any other thoughts, comments, and or ideas on the state of the industry, nerddom. We didn't really go into movies or comics at all this time, but I'm sure we can find some of that for next time, maybe. Fingers crossed. But
Yeah.
this is Spectator Mode, and thanks for listening.